Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Quantum Leap, Season 1, Episode 5. So, Ben's song in 1879, the cowboy western era, is to go on along with his modern-day co-stars, or cohorts, and stretch this story as much as they humanly can, to hope that the next leap will be shown on the following episode. We didn't get a transitional leap in this episode. Of course, they are to have thought that a clickbaiting thing to get people interested in the following week would be the only way to justifyingly end this episode. And that's what it really is. It's a clickbaiting thing. Yeah, we know that these episodes weren't that good, but hey, here's a clickbaiting thing to make you interested in the following week. And I'm just like, wait a minute. So, not only have the last 2 weeks been these stretching attempts, but then now we're going on and introducing a clickbait element. Just be like, yeah, we know the show sucks, but just tune in next week. It might get better. Might. Yeah, because this episode was like a very strained okay. It was very just an okay, but with a fart sound next to it. It was like, okay, that's what it was. Really, for this episode. So, let me tell you what this episode, of course, was about. So, come to find out, the big thing coming out of this episode is we find out that Ben's song, it seems, is to not be leaping alone. You can immediately state it's like, well, Addison! And I would just state it's much more than just that. Who is Addison? Isn't she, like, going on and leaping with Ben? Why don't you count her? It's like, I mean, there is something else going on beyond that. So, we, of course, in this episode are to have Ben, who is in 1879. And, of course, in that era, we are to only go on and be able to settle every dispute or every difference with a loaded gun, with a duel. And so in this episode, we of course have to go on all the way through this episode and tease the fact that we are going on and doing said duel to then by the end of the movie, or end of the episode, just swerve and come up with some kind of other strategy or tact. And so, while that is going on in 1875, it seems that the modern day behind the Leapers are to go on and do the exact same thing. Because this show is to be dripping with creativity. Because, of course, in the modern day time period, we then go on to find out Jen's backstory and come to find out, so we're going to do this every week now. Every week, we're going to go and get every backstory of the Behind the Leaper characters, and you bet that's what they're going to do to really stretch this show. This show is 5 episodes in, and they're already having problems writing it. It feels, to me, that they're having a massive problem figuring out how to write this. How hard is this show? Really, how hard is it? So, we are in the modern time period, are to find out that a congresswoman is to have suspicions that everyone is to be going on at this compound and starting the Quantum Leap projects without the congresswoman's consent. And so the congresswoman comes in, who of course has the name that I will probably butcher, called Kavita Adini. Adini? And so Kavita, it seems, is to come in here and question every single one of these side characters to then try to come up with a clear consensus of whether or not that these people are hiding something. And so the Congresswoman is to build up to getting to Magic, and come to find out Jen is to hand out to Magic this nuclear option that Magic is to go on and figure out whether or not he is going to use it or not to save his project. But also we are going to have Magic, who may come up with his own tact, his own way of going on to save the Quantum Leap project, or otherwise this show would get canceled quicker than it started. Man, do they honestly just need to quickly write in Sam here soon. To go on and just give us this easy project, this easy writing thing. Because, man, are we just gonna go on and really just not give us anything really like fun as far as like episodes here. 4 out of the 5 episodes have just been and we had one that I thought was at least like a solid good, if not great, episode. And so really, if people have not fallen off by now, so hopefully you go on and you're watching this review consistently, because who knows how many people are really going to be watching this review the further and further we go on here. But I really do appreciate anybody that goes on and does so. It really does mean a lot. So with that said, I think it's about that time to just go into spoilers about this episode. One thing that I also want to state, as far as the teeing up also, is we're taking a lot of time for Ben to talk about his relationship with Addison, because that seems to be another easy thing that they can kind of add in here. But here's the problem that I have with this show in its entirety. I think we have too many times where Ben goes into an opened area and is talking to Addison, going on and possibly making anybody that is to look around at Ben and state that whoever he has leaped into is to be a crazy person. To where that's where I honestly want this story to leap into next. Let's have Ben just leap into a crazy person, so that way we can actually really justify when he's talking to Addison that, like, we don't have to go on and, like, rationalize that whole thing. But also the one thing that I was thinking in my brain that they actually showcased in this episode, which I thought was wonderful, was that Ben is getting very tired. Within all of the leaps of which that he has gone on and done, he has yet to sleep yet. And I was like, oh my god, like, that actually was the smartest thing for this show. Because every single time Ben leaps into somebody, it's not like he's gonna go on and, like, get a real good solid night's rest, because of course the leap won't allow that. And so Addison makes the joke, it's like, well, like, you can rest assured that the people that you leaped into are getting a really good rest. So here's the thing, that's how they can justify writing Ben in a mental hospital leap episode. He can go on and be a crazed person, and come to find out, we then can go on and have Ben, who is actually losing his mind, because he of course hasn't slept in a number of days, and that would actually work out perfectly for that episode. So, writers, I'm helping you out. Because we've already had a quantum leap from prior show episode where Sam had gone on and, like, when he leaped, uh, really he leaped into the person he leaped into. He became the person he was leaping into. And he ended up in this mental hospital. And so Al, the best way he could was to try to get Sam to do what he needed to do. And like that leap was pretty tough to accomplish. But like I'm hoping Ben is to kind of try that same kind of episode, especially if he hasn't slept for a number of days. So anyways, let's go on and let's go into that double five. It's about that time yet again to just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time again to spoil this episode. So in the beginning of the episode, we come to find Diego, who is to be Sam's leaper into. I really had to work around me like making that mistake of words. So Song is to leap into Diego. That was a better attempt. And so we have Song, who is now with Valentina, who is to mention how, of course, her father was to die, and now Valentina is upset that Diego is to want to leave town, and that also they have gone through their hardships and their whatevers. So we go on to have Ben, who is trying to, with words, try to figure out who he actually is. And so Ben is just like, well, hey, like I'm kind of old and I don't remember all of our hardships. So if you can go on and kind of tell me what they all are, like, aha, like trying to figure out a way to know who his character is. So Diego goes on to go outside to look at all of the settings, to look at this being the Old West. And so, come to find out, there is a situation here where we, of course, have Josiah, who is to be this outlaw making it into town. And we immediately have this outlaw who is to state that he is going to take control of this town, and that when it seems when the sheriff and the deputies are to want to go on and try and resist, we immediately have Josiah who shoots the sheriff falls over, and the town is to immediately realize that they have no one to defend them now. We have all but every single deputy, with the exclusion of one, who of course is to be Henry, that is to all leave town. All the deputies, besides Henry, leave town. So we, of course, are to have Valentina, who I honestly wish that they would have gone on and made her sheriff, because that would have been cool. But anyways, so we have Valentina, who is to be the only one who is to talk against Josiah, and is to mention that there is a new gunslinger in town. My grandfather, Diego. And Ben, in his mind, is like, please don't say it's me. Please don't say it's me. And, of course, Ben ends up being the one who is to have to save this town. So, come to find out, Addison is to now come into this time period, as she, of course, is to go on to talk to Magic, and is to realize that Ben has leaped into 1879, and she's hoping it's some kind of goofy mistake. But then when she goes on to leap, or goes on to hologram her way into this time period. She's like, oh, okay, I guess like it's in 1879 after all. So we go on to find out that Ziggy doesn't have much for information for this time period because, of course, it was very scarce to get much knowledge. That, of course, there's much documents or whatever, and so on and so forth. So I'm like, man, Ziggy freaking sucks. Ziggy just sucks at his job. Like, really, is there any kind of cheat way that we can come up with, like a modern thing to help out the older time periods? Come on, Ziggy. Ziggy is the freaking worst thing in this show. Man, before, like in the other Quantum Leap shows, like we would find out right away, like, okay, you're here to do this, and here's the goal, and Sam would just be like back and forthing. It's like, well, hey, do you think that like what I'm doing here is going to get even closer to that goal? And they're just like, I don't know, like I don't. And so there'd be like the whole buildup of that, of just like, what if there was a less and less percent drop of Ben being able to accomplish his goal the further and further we go on into an episode, to where it's like, oh, there's a 10% chance, there's a 5% chance, oh my god, there's a 1% chance, Ben. And then Ben all of a sudden still like accomplishes his goal with 1%, and boom, he leaps. That's how they can go on and make this exciting, to just be that Ben just purely by luck just did his leap, just figured out a way, and you could have Ziggy just be like, oh my god, he just figured it out. How? So, but again, we don't have Ziggy, so like F that, right? F an exciting episode, right? So we go on to, of course, have Ben, who is possibly thinking, well, hey guys, like, as we go on to the saloon and he tries to order water instead of whiskey, and he comes to find out that basically the water is dirt, which I immediately knew that in, like, medieval times, where a lot of times characters would just drink wine because the water would be so horrid that you, of course, would justify drinking wine instead of water. And so with that said, I immediately knew that the Wild Wild West would be the same thing. So what is the girl drinking then? Is she drinking whiskey? What is she drinking? So maybe she's drinking like juice, like prune juice, or I don't know. So we have Ben, who is to talk to the people in town, and he has to come to the conclusion that maybe he should try to pay them off. Pay all these outlaws. And so Ben is like, maybe I can get some money together, and maybe if the town contributes, then maybe these guys will either go away, or we can just pay them off. So Ben goes off to try and pay, and finds all the deputies who have gone on and left. And so it's like, well, I guess paying them off is not an option. So the further and further we go into this, and the more that Ben is like, well, I guess I'll be a gunslinger. I guess I'll go on and start practicing and start to try to hit these cans and hope that I can just go on and maybe duel this guy, because it seems that Valentina is desperately wanting me to do so. So Song starts practicing, and then we go on and we have Henry, who is to ask Ben, it's like, well, hey, it's been a while since you've like held a gun, right? And Ben is just like, well, yeah, like I'm a little rusty. So after Henry leaves, we then have a moment between both Ben and Addison where we have Ben, who is to want to try and go on and become a better gunslinger, but he also wants something in return from Addison. He wants to know about their first date. Because, of course, he wants to remember more. Even though, again, we immediately have Addison, who is talking to all the guys, and they're like, well, yeah, like, maybe he shouldn't remember anything, and so on and so forth. But, like, Addison is going to keep jogging Ben's memory anyways, because we just have to go on and do this. We just have to go on and have these whole memory things that, of course, are to give us more story here in these episodes. So, we have, after Ben is to go on and practice here, and I think I'm trying to, like, hold off on all the Congresswoman stuff because it just doesn't really matter to me. And we have Ben, who finally goes to the people in town and finally confesses that he cannot go on and battle this guy. He cannot go on and fight and win and beat this guy in a gunslinging contest. So Valentina is to have gone on and take the guns, who of which were her father's, and go out to fight this outlaw herself. Because, of course, Ben is to find out, with him going on and meeting with Ming and Wei, Ming and his father, that not only he is to have gone on and, like, kind of got a little bullet wound, because when he is to shoot, he shoots himself in the arm by accident while practicing. So Ben is to go on and talk to these guys, and we have at one point where Ming's dad is to not be able to talk or be able to understand what people are saying. So even when Ben can go on and speak Cantonese and talk to this guy, we have Ming, who's just like, well, like, he can't understand you. So we, of course, have Ben, who's like, well, just tell him that this food is great. And it seems that Ming's dad is wanting to put up a restaurant. So, but at some point we also find out that Diego's son had left him some guns, and so Ben retrieves those. And so when Ben then realizes that he can't go on and fight this guy, we have Valentina that takes the guns and is to go up against this guy, which really just leads to then Josiah, who is to bring back Valentina, to then state, like, okay, well, like, we're gonna have to go into a duel definitely now, because there is a whole bargaining chip of things. That if Ben wins, then he'll get Valentina and the town will be safe. But if Ben loses, then he's dead, and what else really matters? Like, they'll go on the way they've been going on. So now there, of course, is this build up to the duel, the anticipation of all of it. And I think now is the perfect time to go into this Congresswoman story. To really just be like, oh no, like, you finish the story. I will, after I get all up to all of this side crap that, of course, just didn't make much of a difference. But it was interesting to see Jen's backstory, even though I was like, ah. So, with that said, we have Addison, who is going on and talking to Ian about the Wild Wild West. And so Addison is going on and telling Ian, like, well, hey, I need you to pull up every single thing that you can about the Wild West. And Ian is just like, Okay. Sure. Like, I have all the time in the world to just look up every single thing I can about a time period. But then Jen is to come to both Ian and Addison and is to state, yeah, like, you know that project that we're doing right now? The project that we're doing every single day? Yeah, like, we can't really go on and talk about that project right now. And Addison is like, well, why? And Jen is stating that a congresswoman is coming in to inspect what's going on here. And so, yeah, like, try to have mum's the word about the project that they are doing, or almost really just lie about what they are trying to do here, or twist or bend the narrative to hopefully helps this congresswoman none be the wiser. So the congresswoman comes in and she starts interrogating everyone involved in the project, with the exclusion of course, Ben Song. And so we have this congresswoman who's coming in and asking Magic about Ben Song, and Magic, his estate, is like, well, it seems like Ben is away for today. And so then the congresswoman is to go on and question Addison. And so Addison is to yes ma'am and no ma'am this woman, basically telling her to F off with the way she's just talking to her. And so we have the congresswoman asking Addison, it's like, well, hey, like, since you're engaged to Ben Song, like, where is Ben? And Addison is stated, it's like, well, like, he has had a personal matter of which that I will not go on and state here. And so the further and further that the congresswoman is to ask Addison questions, the more she realizes that it's a usual yes ma'am or no ma'am answer, to where it seems that the congresswoman is to realize, it's like, well, like, it seems like you're just trying to go on and state the same kind of tone no matter, like, what I am to ask you. And Addison is to be like, well, yes, and the congresswoman's like, yes ma'am. Like, because I know you're going to answer me that way. And I thought that was kind of interesting, that, like, back and forth of just Addison just going, like, I don't give a and, like, the congresswoman is like, oh, yeah, I know you don't give a like, but I'm going to bring it up right now that you don't give a like, and so Addison just leaves, and we, of course, go on to have the congresswoman who's realizing she's going to get no answers that way, Wolverine. So we then go on to have the backstory of Jen. It seems that Jen was to be this, like, hacker, or this person who was to try and steal away Bitcoin from people, and somehow Magic was to have gotten Jen and made her his head of security, because, of course, since she knows more of the ins and outs and what everybody would go on and try, that it seems that Jen is to be perfect for this job. And I'm like, yeah, but wouldn't you not be able to trust her then? But I guess maybe she's reformed. I don't know. But so, in my brain, I'm like, of course they're going to talk about Bitcoin, because that seems to be, like, the 2022 thing to talk about, because I don't know how many people just go on and just randomly talk about Bitcoin as if it's a legitimate currency. Like, we had Big Bang Theory who goes on and talks about Bitcoin and so on and so forth. And so now everybody, instead of going on investing in stocks, they're investing in Bitcoin. Oddly enough. I don't know why. Don't invest in Bitcoin. I wouldn't. I couldn't trust Bitcoin. So we again have the congresswoman who is to be stating that it's like, well, hey, like, I'm going to come in and I want to go on and, like, look through all of your stuff, and I can just come in here and do so, right? And Jen is like, well, you would have to go on and get a warrant for all of that, because, of course, if Jen is to also have been a person who has kind of done some bad things. She is to have known every single rule and law that is to tie into that. And so that, of course, is to have Jen do her due diligence to just state it's like, well, hey, if you want to come on and look through all of my things, then you're going to need a warrant to do so. And so that is like kind of the counter that Jen is to come up with, because she is to be, of course, uh, a person who is to be very tactical and very smart, as we are to see here. So now we go on to Ian. Ian, it seems, is to kind of give away the hand here, as we, of course, are to go on and have the congresswoman talking to Ian, and the congresswoman is to state it's like, well, hey, like, it seems that there is a massive amount of power surges that are kind of going on in this compound. And Ian is like, well, yeah, and I've gone on to try to put some things in place to try and correct that, to try and go on and fix that problem. And so the congresswoman is like, well, that's interesting, Ian, because every single amount of power that has gone on to be used seems like the equivalent in a number of notes to be the equivalent of power that you guys would go on to need to do the Quantum Leap project. So what are you guys not telling me here? And so Ian's like, you caught me. And then so we have Jen that gives Magik this file. Come to find out, we have the congresswoman with, I believe, a brother of hers that were to have gone on and been involved in this car accident. And what the congresswoman had gone on and done, and had switched that her brother was in the driver's seat when actually she was. And so, like, that is the nuclear option of which that Magik could go on and now give us here. To state, like, okay, we're going to blackmail this woman to keep this project alive. And so Magik is like, I'll figure out what to do. I'll figure out what to tell her. So the congresswoman is to now be gunning for Magik. And so now Magik is coming up with this master plan. So when the congresswoman is to start to realize that the Quantum Leap project is going ahead without her consent, and is to now go on and tell Magik this, we have Magik who's just like, well, I have a story. And so Magik goes on and tells a story about the congresswoman and her brother in the whole car accident situation. And the congresswoman is asking Magik, it's like, are you blackmailing me? And Magik's like, no, here's the thing. We are, the further and further we are to go on in this experiment, are getting closer and closer to trying to perfect what timeline or time period we can go back to. And we more than likely can go back to a specific point in time to try and prevent your brother from ever dying in that car accident and save him. And so wouldn't you want us to go on and continue this project to save your brother? And so the congresswoman is like, and Magik's like, yeah. So the congresswoman is like, okay, all right, like, I'll let this slide. So Magik is to go on and tell everybody what he is to have gone on and done, so that way they can keep this project afloat. So it's like, all right, so, like, luckily, with or without her consent, we're doing this project regardless. So now let's go on and go back to 1879. Yeah. Luckily, I got that right. So we have Ben, who is to be with Addison, and he is getting very tired. Ben is to talk to Addison as a state like, yeah, I haven't slept in the time of which that I've gone on and into leaping into people, and Addison ends up saying it's like, well, all your other leapers have, so like, there's that for you. So Ben is to go on and be like, yeah, I can't figure this out. Like, I don't know how to solve this problem. And so Addison is to state, well, like, think about it this way. Everyone in this town has some certain special ability. Certain people have the talent of explosives, and some people are to own a bar and have alcohol. Like, you can possibly go on and come up with some kind of mousetrap, which is to, of course, be similar to the old-fashioned board game, if you guys have ever heard the board game Mousetrap, that all these pieces can come, like, dominoing down, and then, like, it ends up trapping the trap of the, or it ends up trapping the mouse by the end of it all. So it's, like, it was fun to set up, but it was just a lot of things that all had to just perfectly work out. And if it didn't, man, did that just suck. So, when Ben, of course, is to go on and try to rationalize that instead of him going on and fighting this guy, instead, let's have them go on and all throughout this town work together in coming up with a way to defeat these outlaws. And so they come up with this tactic to, at first, have these outlaws walking into this area. And so we go on to have Frankie, who, of course, is to light this fired circle around these outlaws, and all of a sudden it seems like firecrackers are going off in the background, and Josiah is to state, it's like, it sounds like the whole entire town is shooting at us. Oh my god. And so we have Josiah, who kind of runs out of these flames and is going into this bar, and they are to be chased to this door. And we have Josiah that goes to this door, and all of a sudden we find out that Henry, who of course is the new sheriff, has gone on to figure out a way to, and with the help of this blacksmith, who has also kind of lost his blacksmith business, we have the blacksmith who is to construct this massive cage, and Henry is going to pull this lever to then cage Josiah, because the plan of it was for Ben to go on and get the bounty on these outlaws, so he then can go on and, like, not only, like, save this town from this guy, but these bounty guys could go on and collect these men so they can get the reward money for this, and so Song could go on and help the town even more so. So instead of really Ben going on and just being attached to one person in this episode, besides Valentina, he honestly is to be attached to a town in this episode, where he's going to have to save this whole entire town and think of how the town can save itself. So, by the end of this episode, we are going on to consistently have Ben, who realizes that all things have technically been resolved now, and he's going to be leaping soon. And so Ben is consistently talking to Addison, And we have these moments where Ben is to tell Addison that he's going to do everything humanly possible to try to get back to Addison, and that at some points also he wants to either hug her or kiss her or whichever, as we technically have Addison, who is to try and help Ben kind of steady his gun so he can fire it properly. Because, of course, Ben is to state in this episode that he feels that he hates guns, or that he has never gone on and used them. He's been like a pacifist, and so on and so forth. So we had to kind of figure out a way to not go on and do with the whole duel thing throughout this whole entire episode. So, by the time that Ben is to be finishing up here, we have this leaper that comes in to talk to Ben and is to state, like, well, hey, like, I don't know what you're doing here, but, like, stop following me. And so come to find out, this guy is to know that this guy is to also be a leaper, and he wants him to stop. So, come to find out, we are to realize that there are two leapers now. It's just some guy named the Leaper. And so we'll find out in the following episode who this guy really is. As well as also if Janice is to go on and be this Leaper's Al. We'll find that out. I'll find that out also within the following episode. And so we go into no transitional leap, so I think that is my transitional way to just end this review. I'm going to get out of here so I can try to make this as short as possible. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that I forgot about, because I'm sure that there will be. So, with that said, hopefully our next leap is going to be a good episode. So, with that said, goodbye everybody. Goodbye everybody.